Welcome to our bi-weekly webinar. Excited to have everybody here. If you want to turn on your cameras, always helps. Jim likes that because you can see their expressions and see your interest for the webinar, which was awesome. But
yeah, Jeff, I always play off of you, buddy.
yeah, that's great. No, welcome everybody. So this is a bi-weekly webinar that Jim and I host to add value to the real estate agents here locally. And one of Jim's favorite sayings is iron sharpens iron, right? We learn from each other. And this is a very pertinent topic that we have, municipal lien searches. Got the best real estate attorney that's going to be going over this, lots of years in the business. Let me introduce myself. If you didn't know, I'm Ryan Poole. I'm a fellow real estate agent in the trenches with you. Been doing this for over 20 years. And I'm also the founder of RealTrade, which is an online marketplace and social media platform for real estate. Big difference that we're than Zillow and the other online portals. As a real estate agent, it's free to join. Once you create a profile, okay, you own your own listings, and imagine you can get direct leads right off your listings. So I tell agents, check that out, realtrade.io. You can get free listings. And the second part is we have the social aspect where you can not only get connected with other agents, buyers and sellers can follow you to see your content, but you can also get connected with awesome service providers like Jim, like inspectors. We have a great lender here, Jeff Stewart's on the platform, so you can get connected with them and help you facilitate business and close more deals. So go ahead, Jim.
I think your message is incredibly timely with regard to what's going on in the background in the whole real estate world, Ryan. Like the relevance of the platforms that we've been accustomed to relying on is being undermined, deteriorating, and good stuff is coming for agents that are progressive and thinking about how to do business in the new world post Sitzer. So having brought up Sitzer, well, actually, I wanted to mention something while people are still coming in. My goal is to talk to you guys about stuff you won't hear anyplace else. I scroll and look at what the local realtor associations are offering. My goal is to offer you guys stuff that you guys won't hear anyplace else. There's no dumb questions. So anything that you're thinking of, please put it in the chat. We'll monitor that. Text me 24/7. You can go to newpathtitle.com and you can log in and you can get a hold of me anytime you want via text. I want to get you guys in and out in 30 to 45 minutes on the topic. Like Ryan said, if you can turn on your cameras, it's great because I can feed off the responses I see you guys giving me and I know to move on or not. At the end, we'll have a question and answer session. And we're also going to give you a bunch of tools that'll help you guys save time. And again, text me with any future topics. The topic today is 2 things every agent should know about municipal lien searches and how to close on time and make sure you're going to get your commission. Before we jump into that, I want to talk about Sitzer for one quick second. Sitzer Burnett, Ryan mentioned something I had not heard yet, but he said that the Department of Justice, Ryan, if I say something wrong, the Department of Justice is jumping back in and they're not a part of the proposed settlement. So they have their own independent claims. And I guess they're gearing up to take aim at NAR again. You read an article? Interesting. Yes. So the real interesting question to me is, do you have, after the proposed settlement occurs in July 2024, hopefully, do you have to be an NAR agent to post to the MLS? I have not heard anybody say you don't, but I could imagine that could be stripped away, but I have not seen anything in the proposed settlement. Anything on your side, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a great webinar, obviously, our last webinar on this topic, but yeah, it's still going to be interesting. I think there's still things that are going to be that are going to shake out, right? We have the proposed settlement that's coming, as you said, in July of what's going to happen. The 2 big things that are implemented, that you have to have buyers agency agreement now with your buyers. And of course, the second big thing is you cannot post. There's going to be no cooperation agreement on the MLSs, right? So you can post as a listing agent of what you're offering to the buyer's agent on the MLS. Now you can post it other places, but you can't put it in the, in the MLS anymore.
And so what I'm seeing in the workaround is, just from an MLS perspective, is that sellers are going to post concessions. So it'll just say something blanket like 2% seller credit to buyer, something like that. And then everybody can have the discussion outside the MLS about how to apply that. The other thing I wanted to say is, in the post-Sitzer judgment world, when people are talking about how do I entertain the most buyers when sellers and sellers agents are having the conversation about how do we drive the most buyers to the table? There is going to be an opportunity for sellers to distinguish themselves by offering buyers compensation, because there's going to be a lot of buyers agents. There are going to be a lot of sellers who aren't going to offer it. So if you're the buyer's agent who offers it, and that's legal steering, right? Because if you have a buyer and the buyer says, if you're a buying agent and you say to your buyer, do you only want to see properties that offer sellers compensation so you won't owe me any money at the end of the deal? Now the buyer has legally steered the buyer's agent to all the sellers' homes offering buyers compensation. Does that make sense, Ryan? That's
Yeah.
legal steering versus illegal steering, which is where the agent takes the buyer to the properties that they're going to get paid the best at. If the buyer's agent gets ahead of the ball and says to the buyer's agent, hey, show me some property. Do you want to only see properties that pay buyers compensation? Now that's legal steering. Boom, freaking genius. So now when you're having your conversation with the selling agent and the seller, right? So now you're going to say, what are you willing to pay me? What are you willing to pay a buyer's agent? What are you willing to pay me if I get both sides? Now, when you have that conversation about the buyer's agent compensation, you can say, increase your pool to the maximum capacity of all the buyers you can show, because you're going to get more buyers coming to your property, and you're going to have the compensation discussion somewhere in the deal.
Yep. You got to
Why not?
tell your sellers, hey, listen, we want to expose your property to the most possible buyers there is, and we want the holy grail of selling as a multiple offer situation, right? And how do we achieve that, right? Well, we want to get the most buyers as possible through your house.
And instead of not paying buyers compensation in the listing, or making that offer in the listing and having the conversation early and increasing the pool as large as you can, if you don't mention it early, now you're going to have a smaller pool of buyers, and you're going to have that conversation anyways. Like, the conversation's coming.
Yep.
The earlier the better, and increase your buyer pool. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. I think it's an opportunity, and I think that the more I listen to pundits talk about this situation, the more I think that's going to play out. The other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of people are doing new construction, and I'm getting calls about new construction frequently. And so what I did was I came up with screen share. I have a document I call Magic Contract Language, and I've put a bunch of clauses in there that I see coming up over and over and over. Ryan, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen, Jim.
All right, so this is a document I've circulated in the past. It's in our Realtor resources on New Path Title's website. There's a section in it called new construction. So on a new construction, let me blow this up a little bit. In the standard form contract, on line in contract section K, there's a little known clause in here that says that the parties are going to estimate the value of the property for the tax prorations on the contract. So when you're selling new construction, you want to make sure that you've nailed this thing right off the bat in your contract. And I'm going to give you some language for that. So right here, it says, this is standard K of the FAR bar, prorations and credits. And it says, if there are completed improvements on the real property by January 1st of the year of closing, which improvements were not existing on January 1st of the prior year, then taxes shall be prorated based on the prior year's millage at an equitable assessment to be agreed to between the parties, failing which they can go to the county and the property appraiser and get an informal assessment. What does that mean? That means that if you're selling new property, new construction property, and it's in the tax roll as vacant land, and this is the one that we just saw yesterday, but I've seen it come up several times recently. So the land's worth 600 grand, but the improved property is worth 2 million. When you prorate the taxes on the settlement statement, if you didn't agree upon a value, then the proration is going to be on the 600 grand, right? But when the taxes actually come out, now the buyer has the right to go back to the seller and get a readjustment. You familiar with that, Ryan?
Yeah, I've seen that before.
All right, so here it says, in line 505, a tax proration based on an estimate shall at either party's request be readjusted upon receipt of the current year's tax bill, and this shall survive closing. So we get calls all the time this time of year when taxes are coming out, and people say, oh my God, my tax bill jumped so much. Yes, your tax bill jumped so much, you were homesteaded forever, or you had new construction. This paragraph specifically addresses new construction. And so this is what I would put in your contracts. If you're dealing with new construction, pursuant to standard K of the contract for the purpose of closing, the equitable assessment is X and shall not be readjusted when the future tax bills are issued. So like I just did a builder deal. I want to pause for a minute, let that sink in. I just did a builder deal where the property was worth 6 and the property just sold for 2 million. So the vacant land was 600 grand, and that's what the tax bill showed, 600 grand. The property transacted for $2 million, and had the lender not spoke up, right? So these deals close all the time and nobody says anything. But in this particular transaction, the lender for the buyer chimed in and said, hey, pursuant to the contract between the parties, what is standard K? What's going to be their equitable assessment? And so I went back to the builder and they were like, holy cow, we've never seen this in a million years. We've been building for, forever. And I said, the lender brought it up and it is part of the contract. And we did see it recently several times. Some prominent area lawyers on the island have pointed this out in some deals where they were representing buyers. You need to come up with a value. So in this particular situation, we came with a value of 1.4 million. They agreed that's the equitable assessment. And now they can't come later and go back to the seller and say, hey, we want a readjustment. So the seller paid a little bit more than they wanted to at the closing, but they won't be whacked at the end of the day when they do a readjustment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Jim. Thanks for clarifying that.
All right, now we're going to jump into the meat of the matter. Let's see. So we did a show the other day on reading title insurance commitments and make sure you can get paid. The same thing holds true for municipal lien searches. Make sure you get paid. 2 things all real estate agents should know about municipal lien search reports. The first one is going to be the broad topic. Think of a muni lien report like a pre-lien report, right? They call it a muni report. We'll change that. We'll just call it a muni report. Think of a muni report like a pre-lien report. These reports generally reveal these issues. The second part of this discussion is going to be, whose duty is it to fix the stuff that's in the muni lien report? So the first topic is, or the first, what I want to explain is this is part of like a 2-part thing, right? Realtors want to make sure they get paid. We want to know early as possible what the issues are. We want to know before the title company knows if something's going to create a problem. Because we might not get the title commitment or the muni report until 2 weeks before closing it. Or sometimes, depending on what election you make in the contract, we might only get it 5 days before closing. And then what can you do? Nothing. So real estate is not, thank you, Jeff. Real estate is not like selling Sunset. Real estate is not like $1 million listing. This stuff is getting in the trenches, making sure, bulletproofing your deal, and making sure we're going to get paid ahead of time. All right, first part. Think of a muni report like a pre-lien report. These reports generally reveal issues before they become liens. Full pause. Municipal lien search reports reveal issues generally before they become a lien. What are they? Open permits, code violations, unpaid utilities, and unpaid taxes. The election for who pays for a muni lien report is made in paragraph 9A or B, but these issues identified in the report can be a seller's burden or a buyer's burden, depending on what the issue is. And so I could come up with this huge outline on how to manage these things. But the big takeaway for you guys is know what the issues are, know where they come up, and then know how to manage them. And if you need to, text me 24/7. We'll figure out exactly what goes on. And so here's where municipal lien searches are chosen and who pays for it. So right here it says muni lien search. If paragraph 9CI or 3 is checked, then it's a seller cost. If it's a buyer cost, it's going to be if paragraph 9C2 is checked. Those are the title elections. And so this is who's going to pay for the muni lien search. It's going to be seller if you check that one, or it's going to be buyer if you check that one, and seller if you check Miami, right? You familiar with that, Ryan?
Yeah.
I'm moving too
In
fast.
Palm Beach County, it's the, obviously the seller shall designate closing agent. It's kind of our.
Yep.
Yep.
And we can control closing from a buyer side, but we'll go over that in a minute without spending extra money. So that's what it covers, and that's where the elections are made. Open permits and code violations are generally not liens at the start. Many agents call me and they say, but it's in the muni lien report. It's a seller issue. It is and it isn't. It just depends what the issue is. But when they start out as a muni issue, they are not a lien on real property. There are violations or issues on some city official's desk. That's all they are. There's something sitting on somebody's desk that aren't on title yet. But if they go on and on, at some point, a hearing can be held and a judge gives an order and a lien begins. Typically, it looks like this. A homeowner receives a notice of a violation and an opportunity to cure by a certain date. The property is watched by the inspector's office, and they deliver another notice if the owner failed to comply. So typically you get 1 or 2 notices on your door and it says you have 60 days to cut the tall grass or remove the cars, or in the worst case scenario, sometimes get a permit for some kind of structure that's not permitted and it's a life safety or health violation. If you don't do those things, then they're going to post a notice that says a hearing is going to be held. They post it on the door of the property and they send it to the grantee's address in the deed. Almost every owner I've represented on these issues says the same thing. They never went to the hearing because they didn't know it occurred. They didn't receive notice. And the notice failure is easy to cure because the city officials are going to show you the certified record where the notice was delivered, and that's typically the grantee in the deed, right? You might have moved 10 times if it's a rental property, or that you put the wrong address in the grantee section of your deed and it gets posted to the property. And who's watching the property if it's a rental property, and when was the last time a tenant told you there was a violation on their door. Once a lien is ordered by the judge, the order is recorded in the public records, and the recording of the order begins the lien. So now you've got this thing that's on a desk and it's a violation. And now it goes to a hearing and the judge drops their hammer and they said, this thing's turning into a lien and it's going to be $50 to $250. Yeah, okay. Open permits and sometimes unpermitted work. Is that Jeff? Yeah. Do not typically, but can result in liens. Typically, it's because of a life safety or health issue, and the fines for these things range typically from $50 a day to $250 a day. Here are some of the standouts in my mind of some of the best liens I've seen. So uncut grass, $270, $270,000. 270 grand. And I think that the sale of the house was like, 300 grand or something. A pink house with pink address numbers. Can't make this stuff up. $56,000 discovered moments before the closing. The realtor called me up and they were coming unglued. It wasn't our closing. Cars left in the yard. We had one recently for $470,000. I've seen some in Lake Worth for over $1 million. Over $1 million. Unpermitted rentals, 5 to 150K. So there's a license that you got to get. If you don't get the license, you start getting fined. And we see these all the time. And operating without a business license, we've seen that for 300 grand. And we've seen lots lower than 300 grand. And we do lien mitigations. So that's another topic we'll touch upon. Now, the second part, of the most important part of this conversation, is it buyers or sellers' duty to remedy the issues? Muni report issues may or may not be a title issue. That is something to burn into your brain. Many agents think because it's in a report, it's a seller's issue. Generally speaking, if they will show up in the muni report, if they show up in the muni report and title commitment, that's a title issue. they are title issues and the seller's burden to fix. If they show up in a muni report and don't show up in the title commitment, they are not a title issue and are generally the buyer's burden. Not always, but generally. We all agree if it's a title issue, the seller has to remedy it for closing, but if it's a permit issue, this is by default the buyer issue under the standard form contract, and we'll go over there's language to shift that burden. Just put it in there.
Yep.
Use language in paragraph 20 to shift the burden to seller. However, that's if you're representing the buyer. What if you're representing the seller? You might not want to put that in there.
You're going to share this language, what to put in there, right? If we're representing buyers, Jim.
Yep.
In paragraph 20, which is awesome.
That's in my magic contract language. So right here, you see this all the time. You see this language all the time.
Yeah.
When representing buyers, you like to shift the burden and cost of permits and association violations of the seller. We have seen it inserted in part of our section 20. Seller shall close all permits that are open, inactive, revoked, pending, expired, or otherwise not properly closed. Permit all unpermitted improvements and resolve and close all municipal, county, homeowners, and or condominium association violations if applicable prior to closing at seller's expense. That's like the dragnet catch-all, throw everything in there. And then the other thing is a lot of municipalities call permits, sorry about that, that's a bad habit. A lot of municipalities, cracking my knuckles, a lot of municipalities call permits very different things, right? So in our world, there might be three flavors of permit: open, expired, and closed, right? But if you go to other municipalities, they've got many flavors of permit conditions. And so you want to throw enough language in there that you capture them all, so you're not getting into an argument about what's the status of the permit. And then you also want to make sure that you throw in there homeowners and condominium association violations. I challenge you to find where that's tackled in the contract in a black and white manner. It doesn't exist. So instead of having conversations at the closing table about whose burden the rocks are, we saw one recently in a homeowners association in a zero lot line community. And they were buying property A, and property B had placed a bunch of rocks on property A because it looked like that was property B's property, and it wasn't, and there was an ongoing violation. And everybody enjoyed the fact that the rocks were there, so it was a non-issue because it made property A, the subject property, prettier and more attractive to sell. But at the closing table, sure enough, boom, this thing's now getting argued about. So if you put that language in there, you'll avoid that stuff. Any questions?
No, I took a screenshot of it, but you're going to circulate this, this document as well, Jim.
Yep.
So,
yep. All right. So now, if they show up in a muni report, but don't show up in a title commitment, they're typically not a title issue and generally a buyer's burden. Now, I say generally because that's not a black and white rule. We all agree if it's a title issue to be closed by the seller. If it's a permit issue, we went over that, use the language in paragraph 20. Now here's a huge important takeaway. If you represent a seller and you find out the property has a code violation, or if you even represent a buyer and you find out, but chances are you're not coming in the deal that early. But if you do order a title advance and you find out this thing has a code violation or an open permit or something, what's the very first thing you do? The very first thing you do is order an inspection. Obviously, you got to tell your client, but the very first thing you do is order an inspection. Why? When the inspector shows up, they're going to tell you one of two things. If the property is in compliance, this will stop the fine from continuing, generally. Not always, but generally, that will stop the fine from continuing and get it in writing. You want to get that in writing that the fine has stopped accruing. I've seen multiple times. We got one right now where property in Del Rey, the buyer called me up. It's an investor, and they said, oh no, I had the inspector come out there and we did an inspection a long time ago. They've been friends, family friends for a long time, and that fine stopped a long time ago. Well, the inspector might have told the buyer that, the family friend buyer. And this is kind of a weird situation. The seller is in jail, and now they're going to sell the property, and you know the buyer is now the most friendly person on the planet, and so they're going to buy the property. But come to find out, those fines are still going on. They did do their inspection, and those fines are still accruing. He didn't get it in writing, and there's actually no evidence of the inspection. But generally speaking, as soon as you hear about property with an ongoing violation, you get an inspection and that'll stop the accruing fines. What's the other thing that happened? If the property is not, so that's if the property is in compliance.
So like a normal inspector, Jim, or is it by the city or the, whatever entity that's fining?
First thing you do is contact the municipal building inspector.
Okay.
So if you're in the county, you're going to call county code compliance. If you're in the city, you're going to call city code compliance. It's a subdivision of the construction management or construction division. And you're going to have them do a reinspection. You're going to make sure that inspection gets logged, and you're going to use something in writing that says the fines have stopped going up. But that's the very first thing you do, is get the inspection. If the property is in compliance, that's what happens. If the property is not in compliance, now the agent and the seller have a laundry list of things they need to do to stop the liens. And you as an agent can make the decision early in the deal if it's worth it to you or not to continue on. But knowledge is power, and you'll have the power on your side. And you can do any number of things, like tell the seller you got to hire an attorney to fix this stuff. And this isn't a self-serving message, but that's what you do. Or you hire an expert to, they say that I saw one the other day, it was a commercial project. And they said that it had an ongoing code violation for electrical issues. It was a used car dealership. It could have been a house. It could have been anything. You see code issues over electrical boxes all the time. And it cost $5,000 to have the electrician redo the box to make it compliant, and they got a reinspection. But when they got that first inspection, the inspector came out and said, this is an electrical box issue, and the electrician came in, did the work, and that stopped the fines, and we mitigated the fines and sold the property, and the seller, everybody ended up happy.
Let me ask you a quick question. Like how much, do you mitigate the fines typically? Like, let's say, we just saw that
I knew you were
fine.
going to ask me that. I knew somebody was going to ask me
How
that.
good are you, Jim? Like what is is there some kind of like a normal percentage, obviously, that gets reduced? But I like you, I have seen some liens, for like cut grass or, like you said, other things for crazy amounts. Typically, what are they reduced to?
Ryan, you know where Top Golf is? You know that big billboard a little bit east of Top Golf? There's usually high-end luxury car dealerships there.
Yeah, I know the area. Yep.
That big billboard it had a code compliance issue. I don't remember what it was. The fines were $900,000. I got it reduced to $600.
Well, there you go. Hire a good attorney, guys.
Well, I'm going to tell you some other ones, and we're going to go over them in a minute. Spreader liens. So that was the best outcome I ever had. And typically, you don't want to say absolutely, but typically it's around 10% of the lien value. Sometimes it's a lot less, and sometimes it's a little bit more, but typically around 10%. We've done lots of stuff for a couple $100,000 that we got released for a couple of grand. In another situation, a woman got divorced. Her husband had property that had violations on it, but because the divorce attorney didn't do a title search, they'd been divorced for a number of years, and the husband had ongoing code violation property. The divorce attorney didn't do the proper job, and now the woman was going to sell, and there were spreader liens from the husband's property attaching to the wife's property, and so she had a violation. I think it was like $276,000. And it was for foolishness, cars in the driveway, or cars under repair in the driveway, and tall grass and debris. And the violation was it was a little bit under $300,000. And I think we got the thing reduced to like $140,000. It just wasn't happening. But we've got a track record. Ava in my office has been working with us for a long time, and she's got a track record of performing. So what happens is a lot of times we can beat having to go to the hearing and settle these things pre-hearing. and I won't say that we have unique magic dust, but absolutely, we've been very successful at resolving these things without them getting drug out as long as they can. Title advance gives you the knowledge to best manage these issues early in the deal and close on time. And in the worst case scenario, make sure you can close it all. I've seen transactions where a homeowner had properties that had issues on their property that they didn't want to take care of. They didn't want to spend the money, and they just assumed they were going to pawn them off on the buyer. And the realtor didn't know enough to understand the issues. And then we get the thing late in the deal when everybody's frustrated. And now, everybody's got deal fatigue, and the seller's never going to spend the money that it takes to fix the property. And there's one of them we have for an older lady, and she still lives in the property, and she's got abandoned cars in the yard, and she's got tall grass. And she has this number in her mind she wants to get. And if she doesn't get that number, she's not going to sell. And she's been through a couple of realtors. I look at 10 or 20 title advances a day. I can't tell you how many of these issues I see that can be taken care of much earlier than the agents take care of them. I sent out some title advances yesterday. What we do is people order title advances. I take a look at them. I give the realtor my thoughts in a text. And if they want to pursue it further, we pursue it further. And at least they know what's going on, whether they close with us or not. I can't tell you how many agents I talk to that say, oh, the seller's going to take care of this. And we'll go over a couple examples of that.
Let's just talk quick about title advances, guys, because I do want to mention this. It's a free service that Jim offers to us agents, right? So let's say you're going into a listing appointment and you want to know if there's any issues on title that could come up when these municipal lien searches. Order title advance, it's free. You're gonna know ahead of time if there's any issues going on with that deal. So not only can you address them, but now you look like a hero agent because you go to the seller and go, hey, look, these issues came up on on a title advance, and we can address them and deal with them prior to going under contract, so we're not scrambling. It really makes you look like a very well educated agent, and I can't say enough things about title advance with that, Jim, which is awesome.
Thanks, Ryan. So here's a couple of municipal lien searches that we looked at lately. Here's a property in Belle Glade that's sold. You see right away there's unpaid taxes. I mean, I can just go through the litany of disconnects, but not every property, as you guys know, looks like this, but this is just one example of a bad one, but it's got a bunch of great examples. So the seller had no idea that they were going to be at the table. They were going to be minus 20 grand in taxes for past taxes. For whatever reason, it fell off their radar. And in the equity discussion with the listing agent, it never came up. And the equity, what the equity discussion is, Ryan, when you say like, hey, what do we have to pay off in the closing? After you get the listing agreement signed, you say, hey, what do we have to pay off in the closing? Code enforcement issues, we'll go over those in a minute. Permitting issues, we'll go over those in a minute. Public sewer, public works. So this is a summary first page on a PropLogic search, and it points all this stuff out. You can't miss it.
Hello.
Let's see. So the first thing you're looking at is taxes. It goes over, there are tax certificates issued, and it gives you the exact phone number you got to call about tax issues. Is the title agent going to do this for you? Absolutely. But can you get ahead of the ball and figure out what it is? It's one phone call, and they'll get you pointed to where the taxes issued, where the past tax issues are. A tax certificate can be especially troubling because I have seen people get cut off in their commissions by tax lien foreclosures. And so they give you a whole bunch of documents in the report about taxes. And the next section is code issues, tangible taxes, and all these things have beautiful little headers on them so you can't mess them up. Special assessments are in here. So everybody knows what special assessments are. We're not talking about homeowners associations, and we're not talking about condominiums. We're only talking about municipalities that have special assessments for things like water distribution or utilities. So that's a couple of streets in a community where they did a special assessment for bonded improvements, typically waters and sewers. This tells you there are no special assessment. And here it is, code enforcement. There are open permits on this property. There are open code enforcement violations and fees due on this property. Additionally, we have been notified of code enforcement liens on this property. So again, these are municipal report issues that are spotted for you, some of which may be in the title commitment, some of which may not be in the title commitment. This report provides unrecorded municipal debt search results, all the good stuff. And then here you go, exactly what's going on, code enforcement stuff. And here's a order assessing fines. So we talked about where this is getting a little bit in the weeds. I don't want to go too deep, but this is really good, and it's all presented to you in a way that you can actually figure out what's going on without calling anybody. So here, the special magistrate, the judge had a hearing, and they imposed a fine. And here's the ordinances that they're in violation of. So if you just Google Belglade ordinances and you punch in these numbers, they'll tell you exactly without talking to anybody what happened. This is all easy stuff to figure out. And you'll know at the time when you're getting into the transaction as early as possible what you're up against. So in this particular one, there were abandoned properties, and they had a abandoned property ordinance where you had to get an abandoned property, you had to board up the property, and you had to make it safe and habitable. So they had those violations. And then at the very end, it says order $25 a day from May 4th, beginning on May 4th. What is that?
I think above it said like 2010 was when this was issued.
Yeah, this is not very well written, but yeah, 2010. So by the time you do $25 a day for 365 days for 14 years, that's a lot of money. This property closed. We got this deal closed. Here's another one, order assessing fines. So this one is, that was a small one. Here's another, here's the utilities. So they had unpaid utilities, and it gives you all the fines, and that helps you set expectations properly and code issues. So that's it. I've got a couple other examples, but when you get these reports, these aren't title advances. These are reports that you order. So if you get your title advance and it says open permits, or it says code violations or things like that, and you want to know more, then you can go to New Path Title and order title products. And then you can order whatever it is you need. You can order a title commitment, or you can order a PropLogix municipal lien search. Anything you spend on these items, or your seller spends on these items, I will reimburse to you at closing. So if you guys spend 180 bucks on a title commitment, what is it? $175 on a title commitment, and we figure out what the roadmap to clearing up the issues looks like, and we can close on time, we'll reimburse you that money. If your seller didn't pay for it, we'll reimburse you that at the closing.
Yeah. The start of that roadmap is order the title advance, right? That'll tell you right away. And that's free, guys. Definitely free.
I appreciate you saying that. So you go to titleadvance.io, or you can go to New Path Title and order title products, and you can order your title advance right there. So if you click on send us a contract, obviously that's to send us a contract, order title products, that'll get you into title advance. And that there's no cost for that. Let's see, make sure you can close. Another biggie is notices of commencement. So what is a notice of commencement? Notice of commencement, it's going to show up in your title advance. A notice of commencement is a notice to the world that a contractor is working on the property. It's not a lien. A notice of commencement is just a document in the public record. However, a notice of commencement tells the savvy agent there could be an issue. And so what's the issue? You go back to your seller and you say, hey, there's an open notice of commencement. It's from Blackjack Roofing or whatever it is. And you have that discussion. It might just be a matter of getting the GC to sign a notice of commencement release. We call it a notice of termination, an NOT. However, it also might be you owe the general contractor some money, or there's some dispute about some element of the work and they didn't file and they didn't finish out the work. That's just all indicators, warning flags for the savvy agent to get ahead of the ball and take care of this stuff early in the transaction. Spreader and spider liens, we talked about it momentarily. That woman who got the divorce, the husband had property. They were not together. By virtue of their last name, the liens spread to her properties that she was trying to sell. If you get a title advance that stuff will show up. If you get a commitment, that stuff will show up. We have underwriters that will actually write over that. So where some title insurance agencies won't write over spreader liens. What is a spreader lien again, real quick? You have property A you're trying to sell. You have property B with a notice of violation on it. The liens attached to property B, but they also attach to property A. 90% of the title agents out there won't close over that. We will.
So I do want to add this because I work with a lot of investors, Jim, and you'll seem like a hero agent. This is one big reason for your investors to open up a separate LLC for each particular property they're buying. Because if they
When
do
they
get
buy it.
yeah, when they buy it. So then if they do get liens on just one property, it does not spider over to the other ones. Learn that lesson the hard way with one of my investors. So you definitely want to advise your investors to open up separate LLCs for each single property.
Doing it after the fact doesn't cure the problem. So if Ryan closes on a property on Monday and spider liens attached to his property, now taking that property and titling it into a different LLC doesn't fix it. Muni lien mitigations in Palm Beach County and the city of West Palm Beach takes 4 to 6 months. These are not going away quick. Post-COVID, we've seen some take much longer when the owner tries to skimp on the contractor. So what's your job as an agent? You have a property, it has an issue, get a good contractor in there, get the thing fixed the first time. We have numerous investor sellers that are doing the work themselves, doing substandard work, not hiring licensed contractors. We had one that resulted in $300,000 in liens on a commercial property, on a residential property on Broadway. It was residential and no. It was residential property. It was a multi-unit, like a little hotel that had been converted into efficiency apartments. Regardless, they kept getting shoddy contractors in there. The city eventually foreclosed.
Yes.
They foreclosed. So don't skimp. Your job as an agent is to get the seller to get the good contractor in there. Your job as an agent is not to pay for the contractor. Your job as an agent is to convince the seller that they need to do it themselves. I see so many agents chipping into the contractor's fees. And use an order title products. You can close on time and we'll reimburse you at the closing. That's all I have for today. This is a dry topic, but you can save tons of time and you can really provide value to your seller and make sure you're going to close on time and get your commission if you do a few simple things. Starts with the title advance, and then and hopefully that's all it is. I send out tons of clear title advances every day with no issues, but I do see a lot that have issues. And when we have had the conversations with the sellers, agents, sometimes they are in the dark about how difficult these things can be to close. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Ryan?
No, that's awesome, Jim. I mean, like I said, to stay ahead of this problem, guys, you have a free service with Title Advance, titleadvance.io. Let's make sure we should, share that in the chat. You can, obviously check out the URL right there, but it can save you a lot of headaches. I mean, like I said, I've had deals before knowing Jim. If I had ordered a Title Advance, it would have saved me literally months of work and thousands of dollars in my commission.
Not to mention those pesky MV realty liens.
Yeah, hopefully those, I had an issue with that as well. So order those, use them. It's a free service. It's great. Jim, this has been a good webinar. Like I said, it's a very dry topic, but it's something as we're closing deals of real estate agents, that we need to be aware of. And also that great language, Jim, that you shared, right? If you're representing the buyers is huge. You know what I mean? That takes all the burden right off your buyer and basically puts it onto the seller. So it's a great way to look as an educated agent with your buyers that you're taking care of them and looking out for them. Because actually post Sites or Burnett now, us agents, especially buyers agents, we have to literally like explain our value and share our value now with these buyers. And this is like a huge one, is obviously writing contracts and protecting them.
For a million years, I used to have a piece of paper next to my phone when buyers would call me up and they'd say, "Why do I need an attorney?" And I had this little document next to my phone and it had an excerpt from another title company's closing disclosures. And it said that the title company, you can't even make this stuff up. It said that the title company wasn't responsible to record satisfactions of liens and satisfactions of mortgage post-closing. Like, you can't even make this stuff up. And it was from a huge title company that closes hundreds of transactions every day. It said it's the buyer's responsibility to bring it to the title agent's attention. If the title agent if the title agent misses it, it's not their liability. Like, it was like this whole notion that completely ran contrary. And nobody reads those things. And I used to read it to the buyer's agents, or to the buyers that would call me and say, hey, do I need an attorney? And I'd say, do you read every page of your transactions? You read every word? No. Well, here's a sentence from a form that gets signed 100 times a day all over Florida by a giant monster title company. You know, that's the value proposition that you guys have to bring when you're talking to your buyers, to get those buyer's agency forms signed if you're going to be a NAR member. If you're going to be a NAR member.
If NAR, yeah, it's going to be interesting how that all shakes out, Jim. Wow. Wow. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Like I said, we host this bi-weekly webinar. Tell your friends, tell fellow other agents. We're sharing information, making our industry better. I also want you to check out Real Trade. Okay. Real Trade's a place where you can get direct leads off your listings for free, and you can connect with other agents to help sell properties quicker and connect with awesome service providers like Jim. Now, I can't say enough good things about Jim as well. So not only obviously he has his title shop, New Path Title. Okay. He has an awesome closing software called Title Lead, which is like a free contract coordinator. So when you use New Path Title, you have Title Lead, which you can use, which keeps track of all your drop dead dates. You get emails, you get texts when the financing contingency's up, when the inspection period's up. So they literally post all those dates right to the file, and it's free to use. And I love using Title Lead, love using New Path Title. Use guys for all my closing. And of course, using Title Advance. Get in the habit. Start using Title Advance. I even used it recent one as I was with a buyer, because I knew there was some kind of issues with this home. It was an old multifamily in Lake Worth Beach, and it turned out there was some issues. We didn't even spend that much time with the buyer, and we just said, hey, let's not spend a lot of effort on this. There's open permits, there's craziness with this house, and we just moved on to the next deal. So
Ryan, the other thing that you mentioned is, when you're representing buyers, you use Title Advance. While we were talking, I got a text from an agent who is a buyer themselves, and I sent them a Title Advance. And you can control title, but keep the cost on the seller side. How do you do that? In paragraph 20, you simply write, the closing agent is New Path Title. Now, most of the time it works. Sometimes your seller wants to control title and they're paying for it, let them control it. But if you make the election in the contract to have the seller pay for title, and in paragraph 20, not on the escrow section at the top, but at the very bottom in paragraph 20, if you write the closing agent, capital C, capital A, the closing agent is New Path Title, now you can control title and you can have the seller pay for it. Just a little inside tip.
I love it. I love it, Jim. Definitely. Thanks,
all right,
Jim.
guys. It's been a pleasure. I hope you got as much out of this as I did. I want you to go out there and kill it. We're 47 minutes into it, exactly like I wanted. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody.